There was a time when the gods walked among men, a time when destiny was woven with threads of gold and blood, a time when love and tragedy were two sides of the same coin forged in the furnaces of Olympus. And among all the immortals who ruled the world from the snowy heights of the sacred mountain, none shone with such intensity as the one they called Phoebus, the luminous one, he who strikes from afar, the god of truth, music, and prophecy. His name was Apollo, and his story is the story of the light that illuminates and also consumes, of the power that protects and also destroys, of the love that elevates and also condemns. But before Apollo opened his eyes for the first time, before his first cry resonated across the confines of the known world, there was pain, there was persecution, there was a mother who wandered across the entire earth seeking a place to give birth to the children she carried in her womb. Leto was her name. Daughter of the Titans Coeus and Phoebe, she belonged to the ancient lineage that had ruled the cosmos before Zeus and his brothers overthrew Cronus. Her beauty was serene, like moonlight reflected on tranquil waters, and it was that beauty that attracted the gaze of the king of the gods. Zeus saw her. Zeus desired her. And Zeus, as was his custom, took what he wanted without measuring the consequences. Leto became pregnant with divine twins, and then the nightmare began. Hera, the legitimate wife of Zeus, discovered the betrayal. Her fury was immeasurable. She could not punish her husband, for he was the sovereign of Olympus, and no power equaled his. But she could destroy his lover. She could make her existence become an endless hell. And that was exactly what she did. Hera issued a decree that resonated in every corner of creation. No solid ground, no continent, no island anchored to the seabed could give refuge to Leto. Any place that sheltered her would face the wrath of the queen of the gods. Earthquakes would shake its foundations, plagues would decimate its inhabitants, misfortune would fall upon them like poisoned rain, terror spread across the world. Leto walked. She walked for days that became weeks, weeks that became months. Her belly grew, the pains began to manifest, and every time she found a new place to rest, every time she begged for asylum, doors closed before her. Kings expelled her from their territories. Towns rejected her with stones and curses. No one wanted to face Hera's wrath. But the cruelty of the Queen of Olympus did not stop there. Hera sent Python, a monstrous creature born from the earth itself, to pursue Leto. The monster was enormous. Its scales gleamed with a greenish glow under the sunlight. Its breath was poison. Its eyes burned with an ancient and malignant intelligence, and its sole mission was to find the pregnant Titaness and destroy her before she could give birth. Leto ran. Python followed. The Titaness crossed mountains and valleys. She forded mighty rivers and scorching deserts. Her feet bled. Her body trembled with exhaustion. But she could not stop. She could not surrender, because inside her beat two hearts besides her own, two lives that depended on her endurance. And it was then that she found Delos. It was a tiny island, barely a piece of barren rock floating adrift in the Aegean Sea. It was not anchored to the seabed. It wandered aimlessly, pushed by the currents, ignored by gods and mortals alike. It was so insignificant that not even Hera had thought to include it in her decree. Leto fell to her knees on that desolate rock. She pleaded, and Delos, the wandering island, the island that had nothing to lose, accepted. But Leto's suffering had not ended. Hera had one last plan. She retained Eileithyia, the goddess of childbirth, on Olympus, preventing her from descending to help the Titaness. Without Eileithyia, no divine child could be born. Leto writhed in pain on the rocks of Delos. Her screams pierced the sky. 9 days her agony lasted, 9 endless nights in which the world held its breath. Finally, the other gods intervened. Iris, the messenger with iridescent wings, was sent to Olympus with a gold and amber necklace 9 cubits long as a bribe for Hera. The queen of the gods accepted the gift and allowed Eileithyia to descend. The moment the goddess of childbirth touched the ground of Delos, Leto clung to the only tree that grew on the island, a solitary palm, and beneath its shade she gave birth. First, Artemis was born. The girl emerged without a single cry. Her eyes were silver like the moon, her hair dark as a starless night. And as soon as she touched the ground, she stood up, because Artemis was not an ordinary child. She was a goddess, and gods do not know the childhood of mortals. Artemis knelt beside her mother and helped with the second birth. And then Apollo was born. The world changed in that instant. A golden light burst from the newborn's body. The swans flying over Delos circled the island 7 times, singing. The sea calmed, the sky cleared, and the wandering island stopped drifting forever, anchoring itself to the seabed as a sign that something sacred had occurred there. Themis, the Titaness of justice, approached the child and offered him nectar and ambrosia, the food of the immortals. Apollo tasted it, and in that moment, the swaddling clothes wrapping his body tore apart. The baby grew. In a matter of seconds, he transformed into a youth of impossible beauty. His skin shone like burnished gold. His hair fell in golden curls over his shoulders. His eyes contained the light of 1,000 suns. Apollo stood up and spoke. His first words were a declaration of purpose. He said that the lyre and the bow would be his instruments, that he would reveal to mortals the infallible will of his father Zeus, that he would establish an oracle where men could know their destiny. The gods who had witnessed his birth exchanged looks of astonishment. No newborn had ever spoken with such clarity. None had shown such determination. But what would come next would prove that Apollo was no ordinary god. Hephaestus, the divine blacksmith, forged him a silver bow and a quiver full of arrows that never missed their mark. Zeus sent him a chariot drawn by swans so he could travel the world. And Apollo, barely 4 days after his birth, set out in search of vengeance. Python was still alive. The creature that had pursued his mother for months, that had tried to destroy her before he was born, still lurked on the slopes of Mount Parnassus. And Apollo was not willing to forgive. The young god descended upon Delphi like a ray of pure light. Python awaited him. The monster rose to its full height, showing its fangs dripping with venom. For generations, that creature had been invincible. It had devoured heroes. It had destroyed armies. No one had even managed to wound it. Apollo drew his bow. The first arrow cut through the air with a deadly whistle. It found its mark in Python's side. The creature roared in pain, but it did not fall. It lunged at the god with its jaws open. Apollo fired again and again and again. 100 silver arrows embedded themselves in the monster's body, 100 wounds that oozed dark ichor. Python writhed, it moaned, but it kept advancing. Its hatred was stronger than the pain. Finally, Apollo fired one last arrow. This one found the creature's heart. Python fell. Its body collapsed on the rocks of Delphi, and from its spilled blood rose vapors that ascended from the cracks in the earth. Apollo contemplated the corpse of his enemy, and then he made a decision that would change the course of history. There, on the place where Python had died, he would establish his oracle. But the gods do not act without consequences. Python, though monstrous, was a child of Gaia, the earth herself. Its death was a sacrilege that required expiation. Zeus ordered Apollo to purify himself and to institute funeral games in honor of the creature he had killed. Thus were born the Pythian Games, celebrated every 4 years at Delphi. Apollo obeyed. He purified himself in the valley of Tempe, and when he returned to Delphi, he was no longer just the god of light and music. He was also the god of prophecy. The construction of the temple began. Apollo needed priests to serve in his sanctuary, men who would interpret the designs he would reveal. And he found them in the most unexpected way. One day, while contemplating the sea from the heights of Parnassus, he saw a Cretan ship pass by. The sailors were heading toward Pylos, unaware that their lives were about to change forever. Apollo transformed into a dolphin of monstrous proportions and leaped onto the deck of the vessel. The sailors were paralyzed with terror. The dolphin did not attack them. Instead, it took control of the ship, diverting it from its original course. The winds obeyed its will. The currents dragged them toward the Gulf of Corinth, and when they finally touched land near Delphi, the dolphin disappeared. In its place stood Apollo, radiant as the midday sun. The Cretans fell to their knees. The god revealed his identity and his purpose to them. He ordered them to become the guardians of his temple, the priests who would serve his oracle for generations. And because he had manifested himself to them as a dolphin, he told them to invoke him as Apollo Delphinius. From there would come the name Delphi. The Pythia was established as the voice of the oracle, a virgin priestess who sat upon a bronze tripod, inhaling the vapors that emerged from the earth where Python had died. In a state of trance, she pronounced the words of the god. Cryptic words, ambiguous, requiring interpretation, but always true, always infallible. Kings and beggars traveled from the ends of the known world to consult the Oracle of Delphi. Wars were started and stopped according to its designs. Cities were founded following its instructions. The destiny of Hellas was woven in that temple on the slopes of Parnassus. Apollo had fulfilled his promise. He had established his oracle. He had avenged his mother. He had proven himself worthy of occupying a place among the 12 Olympians. But power and glory do not protect against suffering. And Apollo was about to discover that his greatest gift was also his greatest curse. It all began with a mockery. The god of light had just killed Python. His silver bow had proven to be the most lethal weapon in the cosmos. And in his pride, he made a mistake he would pay for throughout all eternity. He saw Eros, the god of love, practicing with his tiny bow. The arrows of Aphrodite's son were small, almost ridiculous compared to Apollo's, and the god of light could not resist the temptation to mock him. He asked him what an effeminate boy intended to do with a weapon fit for warriors. He told him to content himself with fanning the flames of desire and not pretend to compare his victories with his own. Eros smiled. It was a smile that should have warned Apollo of the danger, but the god of light was too intoxicated by his own glory to notice it. Eros took 2 arrows from his quiver. One was of gold, with a diamond tip. It caused instant and inextinguishable love in whoever received it. The other was of lead, with a blunt tip. It generated absolute rejection, repulsion that no argument or action could overcome. The golden arrow pierced Apollo's heart. The lead arrow found its mark in Daphne's chest. Daphne was a nymph of the woods, daughter of the river god Peneus. She had consecrated her life to Artemis, Apollo's twin sister. She had sworn to remain a virgin, rejecting marriage and the loves of mortals and gods alike. Her beauty was wild, untamed, like the forests where she hunted. Apollo saw her, and everything he was, everything he had been, ceased to matter. Only she existed, only the desire to possess her. The god approached. He spoke to her with sweet words. He promised her riches, power, immortality. He told her he was the son of Zeus, that his bow never missed, that his lyre made the stars weep. He offered her everything he had. Daphne fled. There was no polite rejection or elaborate explanation. She simply ran. She ran as if her life depended on it, because for her, in that moment, it did. The lead arrow had done its work. The mere thought of Apollo made her nauseous. His presence was unbearable to her, but Apollo was a god. And gods do not accept rejection. He pursued her, through forests and meadows, over mountains and valleys, along riverbanks and seashores. He pursued her with the obstinacy of one who has lost all capacity for reasoning. The love he felt was not true love, it was obsession, it was madness. It was the poison of Eros's arrow coursing through his divine veins. Daphne ran faster than any mortal could, but Apollo was faster still. The distance between them shortened. The god's breath burned the nymph's neck. His fingers brushed her loose hair, and then Daphne screamed. She invoked her father. She begged him to save her, to destroy the form that had so pleased the god, to transform her into anything but a woman Apollo could possess. Peneus heard. Daphne's feet sank into the earth, her legs fused into a rough trunk, her arms stretched toward the sky, dividing into branches. Her hair became leaves, her skin was covered with bark. Apollo arrived an instant too late. Where once there had been a woman, now there was a laurel tree. The god embraced the trunk. He felt Daphne's heart still beating beneath the bark, slower and slower until it stopped completely. Tears ran down his divine cheeks, and he understood, perhaps for the first time, that there were forces in the universe that even he could not control. But even in his pain, Apollo could not let her go. He declared that the laurel would be his sacred tree, that its leaves would crown the heads of poets and victorious warriors, that it would remain green eternally, just like his love for her. He used his powers of eternal youth so that the laurel would never wither. And so, what he could not possess in life, he claimed in death. This alone would have been punishment enough for any mortal. But Apollo was immortal, and his sentence was to keep loving, to keep losing, again and again. If this story is captivating you, subscribe now and turn on notifications. Here, every narrative is a journey through the myths that forged civilizations, and what comes next in Apollo's story will break your heart in ways you never imagined. Time passed, mortals were born and died, empires rose and fell, but for the gods, time flowed differently. A century could feel like a sigh, or a day could stretch until it seemed an eternity. For Apollo, every day without Daphne was an eternity of pain, but gods cannot remain alone forever. And eventually, Apollo's heart awakened again. Her name was Coronis. She was a princess of Thessaly, daughter of Phlegias. Her beauty rivaled that of the goddesses themselves, and when Apollo saw her bathing in the waters of a lake, the memory of Daphne faded like mist under the midday sun. This time it was different. Coronis returned his feelings. She gave herself to the god by the shores of Lake Bobes, and from that union she became pregnant. Apollo had to return to Delphi. The obligations of the oracle could not wait. But before departing, he left a white crow to watch over his beloved and inform him of any news. It was a fatal mistake. Coronis did not know she carried the son of a god in her womb. And in Apollo's absence, her father promised her in marriage to a prince named Ischys. The young woman, feeling abandoned by the god who had seduced her, accepted. The white crow flew to Delphi. The news it brought ignited Apollo's fury. The god of light, the god of truth, the god who never missed his mark, was blinded by jealousy. He cursed the crow, dyeing its feathers black forever as punishment for bringing such terrible news. And then he sought vengeance. Some accounts say it was Apollo himself who drew the bow. Others claim it was his sister Artemis, always ready to punish those who betrayed her twin's trust. The result was the same. An arrow pierced Coronis's chest. The princess fell. Her blood stained the stones of the courtyard where she had been playing with her friends. And as life escaped from her body, Apollo watched her die. Too late came the regret. Too late he understood that his jealousy had led him to destroy what he loved most. He tried to heal her. he who was the god of medicine, who had taught mortals the art of healing. But the arrow had been fired by divine hands, and the wounds of gods cannot be healed with herbs or ointments. Coronis died, but before her body was consumed by the flames of the funeral pyre, Apollo did something no other god had ever attempted. He opened the womb of his dead beloved and extracted the child growing inside. The child was alive. Apollo named him Asclepius. The god could not raise his son. His duties on Olympus and at Delphi would not allow it. So he entrusted the child to the centaur Chiron, the wisest of his kind, teacher of heroes and healers. Chiron taught Asclepius everything he knew about the art of healing. He showed him the properties of every medicinal plant. He revealed to him the secrets of the human body, and the young man learned with a facility that astonished even his immortal tutor. Asclepius became the greatest physician the world had ever known. He cured diseases that others considered incurable. He healed wounds that would have killed any man. His fame spread throughout all of Hellas. The sick traveled from distant lands just to receive his care. But Asclepius was not content merely to heal. He wanted to conquer death itself. Athena had given him 2 vials with the blood of the Gorgon. The blood from the left side was a deadly poison, but that from the right side had the power to restore life to the dead. Asclepius began to use it. Hippolytus, the son of Theseus, had been torn apart by his own horses when they panicked. Asclepius gathered his remains and restored the breath of life to him. Others followed. The dead returned from the realm of Hades. Families recovered their loved ones. This enraged the gods. Hades protested to Zeus. The lord of the underworld watched as his kingdom emptied. The natural order was being subverted. If mortals could escape death, then the entire structure of the cosmos would crumble. Zeus listened and acted. A thunderbolt descended from the heights of Olympus. It found Asclepius while he was attending to a patient. Apollo's son died instantly, struck down by the most powerful weapon in the universe. Apollo's pain was immeasurable. First Daphne, then Coronis, now Asclepius. Every time his heart dared to love, tragedy followed. Every time he found some light in his existence, the shadows swallowed it. But this time, pain transformed into fury. Apollo could not attack Zeus. No god could confront the king of Olympus and survive. But there were others who could pay. The Cyclopes. Those one-eyed giants had forged the thunderbolt that killed his son. They worked in Hephaestus's forges, creating the weapons of the gods. And Apollo decided they must die. He found them in their underground workshop. He shot them down one by one. Their enormous bodies fell among the flames of the forges they had fed for eons. Zeus could not ignore such an affront. The murder of the Cyclopes was a crime deserving of Tartarus, the deepest abyss of the underworld where the Titans suffered eternal punishment. But Leto, Apollo's mother, interceded. She begged Zeus to forgive her son. She reminded him of the services Apollo had rendered to Olympus. She implored clemency. Zeus partially relented. Instead of Tartarus, Apollo was condemned to serve as a slave to a mortal for 1 year. He was stripped of his divinity, reduced to the condition of a simple shepherd, and sent to Thessaly, where he had to tend the flocks of King Admetus. Admetus was a just man. Although he did not know that his new shepherd was actually a god in disguise, he treated him with kindness and respect. He gave him food and shelter. He protected him from the bandits that plagued the region. Apollo, moved by the mortal's goodness, decided to reward him. When his year of servitude ended, he revealed his true identity and offered him a gift. He helped Admetus win Alcestis, the daughter of King Peleus, by performing an impossible feat that the young woman's father had demanded as a condition for the marriage. And when the time of Admetus's death arrived, Apollo convinced the Moirai, the weavers of fate, to allow the king to live longer if someone took his place. no one was willing to do so. Neither his elderly parents, nor his most loyal servants. Only Alcestis, his wife, was willing to die in his place. But that is another story. Apollo had paid his punishment. He had served as a mortal. He had experienced the fragility of human existence. And when he returned to Olympus, something had changed in him. The arrogance that had led him to mock Eros had disappeared. In its place was a deep melancholy, an intimate knowledge of suffering that few immortals could comprehend. But fate had not finished with him. Hyacinthus entered his life like a dawn after an endless night. He was the youngest son of King Amyclus of Sparta. His beauty surpassed that of any mortal Apollo had ever seen. His eyes shone with a joy the god had forgotten existed. His laughter was like music, sweeter than any melody he could draw from his lyre. Apollo loved him, not with the sickly obsession he had felt for Daphne, not with the possessive passion that had bound him to Coronis. He loved him with tenderness, with patience, with a genuine desire to see that extraordinary young man flourish. He set aside his obligations at Delphi. He temporarily abandoned his solar chariot. He spent his days in Sparta beside Hyacinthus. He taught him to play the lyre. He showed him the secrets of the bow. He instructed him in the exercises of the palaestra, and Hyacinthus loved him back. They were inseparable. They hunted together on the slopes of Taygetus. They swam in the crystalline waters of the Eurotas. They anointed themselves with olive oil and competed in the athletic disciplines so prized by the Spartans. For the first time in eons, Apollo knew happiness. But he was not alone in his love. Zephyrus, the god of the west wind, had also set his eyes on Hyacinthus. He watched from the heights as the young prince devoted all his attention to the god of light. Jealousy consumed him, envy poisoned him, and he waited. He waited for the perfect moment for his revenge. It came on a summer afternoon. The sun was at its zenith. Apollo and Hyacinthus had decided to compete in discus throwing. They had anointed their bodies with oil, as was the custom. Their muscles gleamed under the golden light. Apollo was the first to throw. The discus flew with a force only a god could impart. It cut through the air, disappearing among the clouds before beginning its descent. Hyacinthus ran to catch it. He wanted to prove that he too was skilled. He wanted to impress the god he loved. His feet struck the earth as his eyes followed the trajectory of the discus. And then Zephyrus acted. He blew. A sudden wind, violent, unnatural. The discus changed direction abruptly. Instead of falling where Hyacinthus expected, it veered toward him. The impact was devastating. The metal edge struck the young prince's temple with all the force Apollo had imparted in his throw. Hyacinthus collapsed. Apollo ran to him. He held him in his arms as blood gushed from the wound. He tried to heal him. He, who was the god of medicine, who had healed countless mortals. But the wound was too severe. Hyacinthus's fate was already sealed. The young man opened his eyes one last time. He looked at Apollo with an expression the god would never forget. There was no reproach in that gaze. There was no fear, only love. A love so pure that it shattered Apollo's immortal heart. Hyacinthus died in his arms. The scream that emerged from Apollo's throat made the earth tremble. The Spartans who witnessed the scene fell to their knees, terrified by the magnitude of the divine grief. The very gods of Olympus felt that lament. Apollo did not allow Hades to claim the soul of his beloved. From the blood of Hyacinthus, he made a flower bloom, a flower with purple petals upon which appeared marks, resembling the Greek letters Ai, the sound of lamentation. The hyacinth would bloom every spring as an eternal reminder of that truncated love. Zephyrus was punished. According to some versions, Apollo transformed him into wind forever, condemning him to wander the world, unable to touch or be touched. According to others, he was forced to serve Eros, the god of love, as penance for having destroyed something so pure. The Spartans instituted the Hyacinthia, an annual festival lasting 3 days. The first was dedicated to mourning the prince's death. The other two celebrated his rebirth in the form of a flower. But for Apollo, there was no celebration. Only emptiness remained. The list of tragedies continued to grow. Cassandra was the daughter of Priam and Hecuba, the king and queen of Troy. Her beauty attracted Apollo's attention, and he offered her the gift of prophecy in exchange for her love. Cassandra accepted the gift, but when the time came to fulfill her part of the bargain, she rejected the god. Apollo could not take back what he had already given. The gifts of the gods are irrevocable, but he could add a curse to his gift. Cassandra would keep her gift of seeing the future, but no one would ever believe her prophecies. She foresaw the fall of Troy. She warned her fellow citizens about the danger of the wooden horse. She screamed, pleaded, tore her garments, trying to make them understand. Everyone thought she was mad. Everyone ignored her warnings. Troy fell. Cassandra was violated by Ajax the Lesser in the temple of Athena. She was taken as war spoils by Agamemnon. She predicted the Greek king's death and her own. No one believed her. She died murdered by Clytemnestra, fulfilling the prophecy she herself had spoken. And Apollo watched from Olympus, aware that his curse had destroyed another life. Niobe made the mistake of comparing herself to Leto. She was queen of Thebes, wife of Amphion. She had 14 children, 7 sons, and 7 daughters. And in her pride, she publicly declared that she was superior to the mother of Apollo and Artemis, for she had borne 14 offspring, while Leto had only had 2. Leto heard. Her children heard as well. Apollo and Artemis descended upon Thebes with their bows ready. The god of light eliminated the 7 sons while they practiced athletics outside the city. One after another they fell, pierced by silver arrows. Some tried to flee, others begged for mercy. None were spared. Artemis did the same with the 7 daughters. Niobe was left alone. Her 14 children lay dead around her. Grief consumed her. She fled to Mount Sipylus, where the gods transformed her into stone, but even as rock, she continued to weep. Her tears became a spring that flowed eternally down the mountainside. Marsyas challenged Apollo to a musical contest. He was a satyr who had found the double flute that Athena had invented and then discarded. He learned to play it with such mastery that his fame spread throughout all of Hellas. Believing he could surpass even the god of music, he challenged him to a competition. The Muses were the judges. Both played magnificently. The result seemed to be a tie. But then Apollo proposed an additional condition. Each competitor had to play their instrument upside down. The lyre could be played inverted without problem. The double flute could not. Marsyas lost. The punishment for his arrogance was terrible. Apollo bound him to a tree and flayed him alive. The satyr's blood formed a river that bore his name. His screams of agony echoed through the forests for days. Some say Apollo regretted it afterward, that he transformed his lyre into a constellation as penance for his excessive cruelty. But regret did not return the skin to Marsyas. The Trojan War arrived. Apollo took the side of the Trojans, not because he loved them especially, but because the Greeks had committed unforgivable offenses. Agamemnon had captured Chryseis, daughter of Chryses, a priest of Apollo. When the old man traveled to the Greek camp to beg for his daughter's release, offering a generous ransom, Agamemnon publicly humiliated him. Apollo sent the plague. His invisible arrows swept through the Achaean camp for 9 days. Warriors fell by the hundreds, bodies piled up, funeral pyres burned without rest. Only when Agamemnon agreed to return Chryseis did the plague cease. But Apollo's participation in the war did not end there. He protected the Trojan heroes. He saved Aeneas when Diomedes was about to kill him, wrapping him in a cloud and transporting him off the battlefield. He guided Hector in his moments of greatest glory, helping him break through the Greek defenses. And when Achilles' time came, Apollo was there. The son of Thetis had killed Troilus, Apollo's son with Queen Hecuba, profaning the god's own temple. He had massacred Hector, the most beloved prince of Troy, and dragged his corpse around the walls of the city. Paris, the prince who had started the entire war by abducting Helen, drew his bow. He was a mediocre archer, without the skill or strength of the great warriors. His arrow would never have found the only vulnerable point on Achilles, but Apollo guided that arrow. The projectile flew with supernatural precision. It found the hero's heel, the only place where he could be wounded. Achilles fell, the greatest warrior of his generation, dead by an arrow fired by a coward and guided by a god. The Greeks eventually won the war. Troy fell in flames, but Apollo had claimed his revenge. The centuries passed. The cult of Apollo spread throughout the known world. The Romans adopted him without changing his name, an honor no other Greek god received. His temple at Delphi became the spiritual center of the ancient world. Emperors consulted his oracle before making crucial decisions. Generals asked for his blessing before marching to war. Poets invoked his name before beginning their works. But Apollo was no longer the arrogant god who had mocked Eros. He was no longer the obsessive hunter who had pursued Daphne through the forests. He was no longer the jealous lover who had ordered Coronis's death. Eternity had transformed him. Each tragedy had left its mark. Each loss had deepened his wisdom. The god of light had learned that even the brightest glow casts shadows, that the greatest power cannot control the human heart, that knowledge of the future does not mean being able to change it. Greek philosophers saw in Apollo the principle of order, reason, harmony. They contrasted him with Dionysus, the god of ecstasy and chaos. They said that civilization needed both, the Apollonian light that organizes and the Dionysian fire that creates. But perhaps they understood only part of the truth. Apollo was not only light, he was also darkness. He was not only order, he was also destruction. He was not only healing, he was also disease. He was the god who healed and the one who sent plagues, the one who revealed truth and the one who punished those who rejected it, the one who loved with tenderness and the one who destroyed with fury. He was ultimately the most human of the gods, because humans also contain multitudes. They also love and destroy, create and devastate, illuminate and darken. The difference is that humans die, and in death they find the end of their contradictions. Apollo lived forever. His contradictions were eternal. His suffering had no end. Every spring, when the hyacinths bloomed in the fields of Hellas, the god remembered the young prince he had loved and lost. Every time he saw a laurel, he thought of Daphne and the pursuit that had condemned her to exist as a tree. Every time he heard a prophet proclaim truths that no one believed, he remembered Cassandra and the curse he himself had pronounced. The Oracle of Delphi fell into silence. The temple became ruins. The priests disappeared. The Pythia ceased to pronounce her prophecies. The world changed, and the ancient gods were forgotten by those who had worshipped at their altars for millennia. But Apollo did not disappear. Because gods do not die when men cease to believe in them. They only sleep, they wait, they watch from the shadows of collective memory, and at every dawn, when the sun crosses the horizon and bathes the world in its golden light, there are those who swear they can feel his presence. The god who illuminated civilizations, the archer who never missed his mark except when his heart chose the target, the prophet who knew all destinies except his own. The Greeks understood something that the modern world has forgotten, that perfection does not guarantee happiness, that power does not protect against suffering, that the most intense love can become the cruelest curse. Apollo was perfect, and his perfection was his sentence, because only the imperfect can know the peace of mediocrity. Only the weak can take refuge in the ignorance of their limitations. Only mortals can find consolation in the oblivion of death. Apollo had none of those refuges. His beauty was eternal, and eternally reminded him of what he had lost. His knowledge was infinite, and infinitely showed him what he could not change. His power was absolute, and absolutely useless for healing the wounds of his heart. Apollo's legacy was not only the Oracle of Delphi, nor the temples that rose in his honor throughout the Mediterranean. It was not only the music he inspired, nor the prophecies he revealed. It was not only the medicine he taught through his son Asclepius, nor the victories he crowned with laurel. His true legacy was a truth that the Greeks carved in stone at the entrance of their most sacred temple. Know thyself, nothing in excess. Words that Apollo himself had learned through pain, truths he had discovered at the cost of everything he loved. And so, at every dawn, when the sun crosses the horizon, the Greeks remembered Apollo, not the perfect god of the statues, but the god who loved and lost, the one who taught mortals that the brightest light casts the darkest shadows, that the greatest gift can become the cruelest curse, and that even those who dwell on Olympus know the bitter taste of tears. His legacy was not only music, nor prophecy. It was the most ancient truth of all, that to love is to risk losing. If this story touched your heart, write in the comments, "My light also has shadows."